All right, so we're diving into something a little different this time. It's all about the African Cup of Nations.
AFCON for sure.
AFCON for short.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this YouTube video.
Oh, yeah, I saw this one.
How dare he? Obi Mikel blasts Carragher over AFCON jibe. Mourinho no racist.
Empty title.
From the channel, the Obi-Wan podcast. And
Interesting.
yeah, it features John Obi Mikel.
Former Chelsea player.
Yeah, former Chelsea star, having a pretty intense conversation with the host, Chris McCarry.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because Mikel is really defending AFCON
Oh, he is fired up.
against some comments from Jamie Carragher.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to kind of unpack why this is way more than just a disagreement about football.
Yeah, and you can tell Mikel is speaking from the heart because he says winning AFCON in 2013 with Nigeria means just as much to him as winning the Champions League.
Huge statement.
For a player who's reached, the pinnacle of European football.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a bold statement.
And I think to understand the weight of that statement, we need to remember that the Champions League is seen as, the most prestigious club competition in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So for Mikel to put AFCON on that same level reveals just how deeply African players value this tournament.
He even describes the moment Nigeria won in 2013. Like the streets were packed with people celebrating his families in tears of joy, the whole nation united.
Wow.
It clearly wasn't just a game.
Right? It was a cultural touchstone.
Yeah, it really was.
It's a reminder that football in Africa has unique social significance that maybe we don't always grasp from an outside perspective.
Okay, so let's get into the heart of this Carragher controversy.
Yeah.
What did he actually say that got Mikel so fired up?
So Carragher implied that AFCON was a small tournament in comparison to European competitions.
Okay.
And this comment sparked a lot of backlash because it seemed to downplay the importance of African football.
On the global stage, and Mikel did not hold back in his response. He calls out Carragher's lack of international success and kind of points out the irony of him commenting on leagues he never even won himself.
Right. Like, who are you to say this?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of vibe.
But beyond the personal jabs, what really stood out to me was Mikel's point about AFCON's viewership. He said over 2 billion people tuned in.
Wow.
Which dwarfs many European events.
That's a huge point. It challenges the idea that European football is the only game in town.
Right.
The sheer number of people who watch AFCON speaks to its global reach and its cultural importance.
And this goes beyond just numbers.
It does.
Mikel shared this incredible story about Didier Drogba.
Oh, yeah.
And the Ivory Coast national team.
Using their platform.
Using their influence to actually help stop a civil war.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
In their country. It shows the profound impact that football can have on society, particularly in Africa.
It's a powerful example of how sport can transcend entertainment.
Yeah.
Become a force for peace and unity.
It's something worth thinking about, right? Like, how often do we see sport playing that kind of role in resolving conflict or bringing people together?
So true.
Now, it's no secret that there are some criticisms of AFCON, especially from European clubs and fans.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Who complain about the timing.
Oh, the timing.
Of the tournament.
Always an issue.
It disrupts their seasons, they say.
This is where it gets interesting, I think. It brings up an interesting power dynamic between European and African football.
For sure.
Should African nations adjust their schedules to accommodate European clubs, or is there a need for greater understanding and flexibility from the European side?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The Mikel argues that AFCON is held in December and January because that's when the African climate is suitable for playing.
Makes sense.
It's not as simple as just changing the dates to appease European interests.
It raises some important questions about who gets to dictate the terms of global football.
For sure.
Is there a sense that European football sees itself as the center of the sport?
And everyone else should.
Everyone else should adapt.
To their preferences.
Mikel seems to think so.
Yeah, he does.
He basically throws down the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Urges people to experience AFCON for themselves.
To see it.
He talks about the vibrant atmosphere, the music, the dancing, a true cultural festival.
Yeah, this is where the idea of Eurocentrism comes in.
Eurocentrism.
The tendency to view the world solely through a European lens, often unintentionally undervaluing achievements and perspectives from other continents.
Yeah, and how do you think that plays into the way AFCON is perceived by those who haven't experienced it firsthand?
That's a great question. Something we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, he paints a very different picture from the often commercialized and some might say less authentic feel of some European football events.
Yeah, you can almost hear the music and feel the energy
I know, right?
when he talks about it.
Makes you wonder, how often do we miss out on these unique and valuable cultural experiences simply because we stick to what's familiar and comfortable? Definitely something to reflect on. And this idea of challenging our assumptions and perspectives actually connects to the next part of the conversation.
Oh, this is where it gets interesting.
It involves Jose Mourinho Mikel's former manager at Chelsea, who found himself in hot water over accusations of racism.
This adds another layer to our deep dive, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It reminds us that understanding cultural dynamics can be tricky, and perceptions can vary widely based on individual experiences and biases.
Right. And Mikel's reaction to these accusations against Mourinho was really revealing. He passionately defends. Mourinho calls him our African dad, someone who loves and respects everyone regardless of background.
This speaks volumes about the kind of relationship they had.
Yeah.
Mikel clearly feels a deep sense of loyalty and respect for Mourinho.
And remember, Mikel is incredibly passionate about fighting racism and prejudice. He went head-to-head with Carragher over AFCON, a tournament that's deeply tied to his identity and pride as an African.
Yeah,
So his defense of Mourinho carries a lot of weight.
absolutely. It suggests that he genuinely believes in Mourinho's character and doesn't see him as someone capable of racism.
It definitely adds a new dimension to our discussion, forcing us to consider how personal experiences can shape our views on complex issues.
Absolutely.
But before we delve deeper into that,
Okay.
let's shift gears and explore another point that Mikel raised: the issue of media coverage and its impact on the perception of AFCON.
Okay, let's do it.
So Mikel seems to believe there's a direct connection between the limited media coverage and the lack of respect AFCON receives from certain parts of the football world.
I mean, that's a compelling argument. It raises questions about how the media shapes our understanding of events, especially those that take place outside of our immediate, cultural sphere.
He doesn't just make general statements either. He gives some pretty specific examples, saying that some broadcasters would delay showing matches by like 20 minutes or even air games without commentary.
Really? Wow. That's pretty striking. It suggests a lack of investment and perhaps even a lack of respect for the tournament and its audience.
And Mikel argues that this kind of dismissive coverage, it sends a message to players,
Yeah.
particularly young African players looking up to their heroes.
I mean, it makes you wonder what impact that has on aspiring footballers in Africa. If they see their heroes and their continental tournament being treated as second rate, what does that do to their own aspirations and sense of pride?
Exactly. And Mikel even brings up Mo Salah, who was considered one of the best players in the world at the time, saying that comments like Carragher's make players like Salah question whether representing their African nation is truly worth it.
Wow, that's a powerful point. It suggests that these dismissive attitudes towards AFCON could discourage some of Africa's brightest talents from fully embracing their national teams.
And that would be a loss for everyone, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Both for the players themselves and for the global football community as a whole.
100%. It's a reminder that talent and passion exist everywhere, and we all benefit from celebrating and showcasing that diversity.
So Mikel's not just complaining about the problem. He actually offers a solution, and it's a pretty simple one. He wants people to actually watch AFCON.
He's extending an invitation, isn't he?
He is.
Inviting people to step outside of their comfort zones and experience something new.
He practically begs viewers to, engage with the tournament, to see the incredible atmosphere, the passion of the fans, the unique style of play.
Give it a chance.
Yeah.
He's asking for a chance to showcase what makes AFCON special, not just as a football tournament, but as a cultural event.
He talks about the drums, the vuvuzelas, the food, the dancing, the sheer joy and energy that permeates every aspect of the tournament.
Yeah, it's a very different picture than what's often portrayed in the media.
And this sense of celebration and unity extends far beyond the stadiums.
It does.
He talks about how winning AFCON in 2013 brought his entire country together.
Yeah, a nation united by a shared passion, a collective sense of pride and joy. It's a reminder of the powerful role that sport can play in building community and national identity.
He even talks about the heartbreaking stories of people who've died from the stress of supporting their teams during AFCON.
Oh, wow.
It emphasizes the depth of emotion and the profound connection people have to this tournament.
Right. It highlights the stakes. It shows that for many people in Africa, this is more than just a game. It's a matter of national pride, a source of hope, a deeply personal and emotional experience.
Now, Mikel doesn't shy away from the fact that there are problems within African football,
Of course.
especially when it comes to issues like corruption and bureaucracy.
Right. Important to acknowledge those challenges.
But as Mikel points out, those issues shouldn't overshadow the beauty, the talent, and the cultural significance of the tournament itself.
Right. He's asking us to look beyond the negative headlines and the stereotypes and to appreciate AFCON for what it is, a celebration of African football culture and unity.
It's a call for a more balanced and nuanced perspective, isn't it?
It is.
One that acknowledges both the challenges and the triumphs.
The full picture,
Yeah.
the good and the bad.
And perhaps it's also about recognizing the agency of African nations to address these issues and shape the future of their own footballing landscape.
100%. It's not about ignoring the problems, but about empowering African nations to find their own solutions.
Exactly. It's about respecting their autonomy and their right to determine their own path.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening. It makes you think about how we perceive the world, how our own limited perspectives might prevent us from fully appreciating the richness and diversity of other cultures.
It challenges us to question our assumptions,
Right.
to consider whether we're truly engaging with the world in all its complexity.
There's always more to learn.
Always another perspective to consider.
Stepping outside of our comfort zones can lead to incredible, enriching experiences.
So Mikel has given us a lot to think about. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from this conversation?
For me, it's Mikel's passionate plea for respect and understanding. He's not asking us to ignore the challenges facing African football, but he is asking us to see beyond the stereotypes and the media narratives and to engage with AFCON on its own terms.
I think that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
He wants us to approach AFCON with an open mind, to appreciate its unique qualities, and to recognize its significance for those who hold it dear.
Ultimately, isn't that what cultural exchange is all about? Learning from each other, expanding our horizons, and embracing the richness and diversity of human experience?
Beautifully put. And that brings us back to this idea of cultural understanding and how complex and nuanced it can be. Remember Mikel's staunch defense of Jose Mourinho against accusations of racism?
Oh, yeah. That situation reveals a lot about Mikel's character and his perspective on race and respect, and it's something we need to explore further.
How does this situation with Mourinho connect to the larger conversation about AFCON and cultural perceptions?
I'm intrigued. Fill me in.
Well, it's a reminder that personal relationships can deeply inform our views on sensitive issues, and that sometimes those closest to a situation have a very different perspective from what's portrayed in the media. Let's delve into that in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into John Obi Mikel's perspective on African football and beyond. Remember how he passionately defended Jose Mourinho against those accusations of racism? That's where we left off, and it's definitely a thread worth pulling on.
It is. It takes us from this broad discussion about cultural perceptions to a much more personal story, one that highlights the complexities of race respect and individual relationships.
Exactly. So to recap, Mourinho was managing a team in Turkey and got into a heated exchange during a match. Accusations of racism flew, the media went into a frenzy, and there were calls for him to be punished. It was a pretty volatile situation.
Yeah, these kinds of high-profile cases often get polarized so quickly. People jump to conclusions based on limited information or pre-existing biases.
Oh.
It's easy to get swept up in the outrage without fully understanding the nuances. Right. And that's where Mikel's perspective is so valuable. He steps up to defend Mourinho, and he doesn't do it lightly. He calls Mourinho our African dad, someone who loves and respects everyone regardless of background.
That phrase, our African dad, it's powerful. It suggests a deep level of trust and affection. Mikel is putting his own reputation on the line to vouch for Mourinho's character.
And remember, Mikel is not someone who takes racism lightly. He went head-to-head with Carragher over the perception of AFCON, a tournament that's deeply connected to his identity and pride as an African.
Right. That's what makes his defense of Mourinho even more striking. He's basically saying, I know this man, I've seen how he treats people, and I refuse to believe he's capable of racism.
He even suggests that the accusations against Mourinho are politically motivated, hinting at a potential agenda within Turkish football to bring Mourinho down.
Whether or not you agree with Mikel's assessment, it adds an important layer of nuance to the conversation, It reminds us that things aren't always as black and white as they might seem in the media.
It's a good reminder that there are always multiple sides to every story, and that personal relationships and experiences can shape our perceptions in ways we might not even realize.
It's a call for empathy, really. A call to consider the perspectives of those involved, rather than rushing to judgment based on headlines or sound bites.
It also highlights the fact that cultural understanding is a complex and ongoing process.
For sure.
What might be considered offensive in one culture might be interpreted differently in another.
Absolutely. And sometimes those closest to a situation have insights that those on the outside simply don't have access to.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What have we learned from exploring John Obi Mikel's, passionate defense of African football and his equally passionate defense of Jose Mourinho?
Well, it's been fascinating. We started by unpacking Mikel's frustration with the way AFCON is perceived, a frustration rooted in a sense that African football is often undervalued and misunderstood on the global stage. We explored the historical and cultural factors that contribute to this perception, and we examined the role that media coverage plays in shaping our understanding of events that take place outside of our own cultural bubbles.
And through it all, we've seen Mikel's fierce loyalty and his willingness to stand up for what he believes in, whether it's defending the honor of a continent or the integrity of a friend.
Ultimately, I think this conversation has been a powerful reminder that true understanding requires empathy, open-mindedness, and a willingness to engage with different perspectives, even when those perspectives challenge our own assumptions.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the complexities of our world.